and welcome to Addicted to Murder. This is Cortney, licensed professional counselor with over a decade of experience.
And this is Tricia, and the people that we go over are like enskied for like bad reasons.
Enskied? That sounds bad.
Well, to immortalize a person.
Oh, okay.
So, I mean, a lot of the people we talk about are famous.
It's true.
For
all the wrong reasons.
For all the wrong reasons. And some of them are still alive, and they're probably sitting in their cells like, meh, I'm a narcissist, and this is feeding my ego and all the things.
That's probably true.
So, you know, you do hear about like how people get upset with how popular the true crime genre is because it kind of gives a lot of credence or attention to the perpetrators.
Right. And not enough on the victims.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I get that. But I also think that with at least the population that we look at, that we're really trying to figure out why they are the way they are. And not because we think that they're like awesome, amazing people, but because we're trying to figure out how to prevent that from happening.
Right. And in a way, rather than like sensationalizing them, we're trying to humanize them.
Yeah. Because most of the time they are just like fucked up beings.
Yeah.
That had
they're just people.
They had fucked up childhoods. And although they have free will, I mean, we've gone over a very minimal amount that like did have possible insanity, like full on, you know, most of them made the choice to do what they did.
Right.
And
exactly.
they couldn't, or they wouldn't overcome those urges to be pieces of shit.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not what we do here, or we try not to. So I hope that doesn't come across that we do. But I'm done with that now. Cortney, we're back.
We are.
We have a new case. Different today.
It is different today. So Tricia and I are going to sort of be changing it up a little bit today. So I'm going to be telling the story. And I've got a couple questions.
I don't know this guy at all. I didn't do any research on this person. So I am learning with you guys, which is totally not our MO.
Yes, we're going to be a little more spontaneous today.
Don't know how it'll go. We'll see.
Yeah, maybe we'll like it. Who knows?
Yeah. To me, yeah, it seems like a little more like some of the other podcasts where like one person tells a story and the other one's just like ask questions without knowing anything. That's kind of how it is today.
Yeah. So let us know what you think about that format.
Yeah.
But before we get into that, I have a question for you, Tricia.
Indeed.
So would you rather be stuck in the freezing cold of Antarctica with all of your friends, or on a warm tropical island with only one of your friends?
So what I've read about borderline personality disorder, which I suffer from, is that you stick a borderline on a desert island, their problems go away.
Oh.
Because they are not fixating on everything else that someone else might be thinking, not thinking, doing, not doing about them. Does that make sense?
That does make sense.
To you? Because a lot of the borderlines problems are real or imagined abandonments by people they're around.
Right. So if there's not many people around.
Yeah. Basically, some things I've read, if you stuck a borderline on a desert island, they'd be cured. So with that in mind, I mean, you're still saying the one person is there. So,
yes. But there's like no one else for that other person to be
talking about, real or imagined.
Mm-hmm.
So then I'd probably go that way because for me, selfishly, that would be less trauma for me in the long run.
Got it. That makes sense.
How about you?
Definitely tropical island. Because I'm more of an introvert, and so I'd rather just be with like one person that I really like. And I absolutely hate being cold. I could not survive in Antarctica, even with the best technology and everything. So,
do you watch? What's the name of that show with all of the kiddos that crashed in the plane crash when they were teenagers in the 90s? Juliette Lewis. Oh my God.
Yellow Jacket.
Yes. Have you seen that?
I've watched like one episode and then my free trial ended.
Okay. Well, as someone who's watched like all of them, it's sort of like that. It's a group of girls that, you know, crashes into like a I mean, eventually becomes winter and some crazy shit happens. And I don't want to be a part of any of that.
Definitely.
Like
no Donner
Lord
Party
of the
for me.
Flies type of shit. Remember when they made us read that in school? Well, they made me. I'm older than you.
They would have made me read that if I had taken normal English classes.
Okay.
But I didn't.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, it's just about
I mean, I know what the story
people
is.
going against each other, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, let me turn off my phone here. Good question, Courtney. So, I guess take it away.
Yes.
Introduce us to your case.
All right. So before I get into it, I do just want to put out a trigger warning to all of our listeners. This is a case that includes incidents of pretty severe child abuse and child murder. So if that is something that you are very sensitive to, maybe skip this one.
Okay.
Okay. So our new case is the story of Gordon Stewart Northcott, a.k.a. the Wineville Chicken Ranch Killer.
Wineville? Okay.
A.k.a. the Boy Butcher.
Ew.
Yeah. He's right up there, grade A scumbag.
Okay.
So, Gordon Stewart Northcott, who went by his middle name Stewart, so he'll be called Stewart from now on, was born on November 9th, 1906 in Saskatchewan, Canada. So we're going way back in time for this one.
So the other child killer was the Beast of British Columbia in Canada.
That's true.
Not saying anything about Canadians, just making an observation. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
So his father was George Northcott and his mother was Louise Northcott. There are rumors, however, that Stewart's biological mother was actually his older sister, Winnie, and that he was the product of an incestuous relationship between Winnie and George. Different sources reported different information about this, so
Ted Bundy
definitely brings up some Bundy vibes. And, his sister was much older than him, so it biologically is possible.
Okay.
So there's not much known about Stewart's childhood, but he was raised in British Columbia, Canada. And he claimed that he was sexually molested by his father when he was 10 years old. It's also reported that Stewart and his mother Louise had a very codependent relationship, where she doted on him, gave him pretty much whatever he wanted, and protected him from the potential consequences of his actions throughout his life. So, Tricia, what do you know and remember about codependent relationships? Maybe think back to Eric Napolitano and his mom.
Well, in that situation, it was more than just codependence because she, basically turned him into a surrogate, husband for herself. So that's not where I think you're going. I know that they're bad.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know much more.
Okay. Yeah. So when we think of a codependent relationship, it's basically where two people's lives are so intertwined with each other's that the happiness of one is sort of dependent on the other one also being okay.
Okay.
So they'll almost do anything to make sure that the other one is okay. And this is not an uncommon thing between parents and children.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not every relationship has it, but between a mom and a son would not be unheard of for there to be a codependent relationship building.
Or between spouses.
Yep, you see it between spouses or partners.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. So
failed.
So Stewart displayed deviant behaviors from a young age, at least his teen years. He was a pathological liar, thought nothing of stealing, and had very poor relationships with others. When he was 18, he and his parents fled Canada after he was accused of sexually molesting multiple children in the neighborhood that they lived in.
He was how old?
18.
Okay.
The family moved to Los Angeles, and by this time, his sister Winnie was married and living with her husband and her children back in Saskatchewan. So while in LA, Stewart had dreams of fame and fortune. Mm-hmm. He was actually a talented pianist, and he took acting classes at the local studios. He loved going to the movies with his mother and tried to cultivate relationships with those in the movie business. Stewart was described at this time as very childlike, with a soft and feminine voice, but also being prone to temper tantrums. And he never was actually cast in any sort of Hollywood film, despite his efforts.
He acted like a diva.
He definitely did.
But he wasn't.
No,
like,
he was
really
not
a diva. Okay.
So in 1926, at the age of 21, he convinced his parents to buy him a piece of property in the southern California town of Wineville, with plans to turn it into a chicken ranch. Not really sure why the chicken ranch, that's just what they went with, I suppose. So, unable to build the work and ranch on his own, Stewart drove to Canada and convinced his sister Winnie to let his nephew, Sanford Clark, who was 13 at the time, come live with him in California to help him on the ranch.
Do you think Winnie knew of his possible molestation of the kids before they left?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, there's rumors that there was a really odd relationship between Stewart and his sister.
Okay.
And
I wouldn't doubt it if he's if he is indeed molesting the kiddos around town. He's probably doing something with his sister as well.
well, she was older than him.
Either way, well, whatever.
Yes,
She
it's
was
true.
doing something with him. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there.
Okay.
So Stewart illegally snuck Sanford across the Canadian-U.S. border, and they made their way down to the ranch in California. Stewart would use the fact that Sanford was in the country illegally as blackmail to help keep him compliant. So now, Tricia, can you imagine how it might have felt to be 13 and shipped off to another country with your weird uncle?
No, because that would suck. Your mom, who was supposed to take care of you, is shipping you off to another country. And what was this deal? I don't even know. Like, why? With the funny uncle, who already had to leave one country because, like, most likely something was happening and their family was like, let's get out of here before, like, charges are pressed or something.
Right.
I mean, I don't know how much this kid knew, but I'd be pissed. I mean, unless I didn't like my mom and I really liked my uncle. I guess it depends on how their relationship was.
Yeah. So a lot of the information for this story was obtained from the book The Road Out of Hell by Anthony Flaco, which was based on Sanford's accounts of what he experienced with living with his uncle, Stewart.
Okay.
And so in that book, they do talk a little bit about Sanford and his relationship with his mom. Sounds like she was very domineering, very emotionally and physically abusive. And felt like Sanford, who was kind of more of a dreamer, he liked to read and write and kind of do more of those things, felt like he wasn't man enough and needed to toughen up a little bit. And so that was the reason that she gave for sending him down to the ranch, was that it would toughen him up and teach him some work ethic.
Where's his dad?
Dad is there, and Dad doesn't like the idea, but Mom's definitely in charge.
Okay, that's just weird. Okay.
Yes. And so at this time, Sanford doesn't really know much about his uncle. You know, he's lived apart from him for most of his life.
All right.
But he just knows that, like, when he's around, he and Mom are weird. So,
Okay.
yeah. So, Sanford reported that before they went out all the way to the ranch, they spent a few nights with his grandparents, Stewart's parents, in LA. The first night they were there was also the first time that Stewart physically and sexually assaulted Sanford.
First night.
First night.
Took a long time for that to happen.
Yes. Now, George and Louise witnessed the physical abuse and could hear his screams, but did nothing to stop Stewart or protect Sanford.
So and I'm sure you know this, Cortney, but what I'm learning working with child abuse victims is a lot of the times the perpetrator will do this stuff in front of other people at the house. Doesn't mean the other people, it sounds like these parents, grandparents, whatever they were, knew it, heard it. But I'm just saying, like, for everyone to beware that, like, this stuff does occur right under parents or whoever's noses. Like, the perpetrators will molest victims right in front of other people.
Absolutely.
Just putting that out there.
And of course, his parents had to have known that that was something he did, since they literally ran away from Canada to escape prosecution, essentially, for that.
Okay, so back to the first night, he's assaulting his nephew. The nephew is crying out, and grandparents/parents, well, I guess it would be this kiddo's grandparents,
This kid's grandparents.
heard it.
Heard it.
And ignored it.
And saw the physical abuse happen. It happened in front of them. He, like, knocked him out.
So he physically abused him and sexually abused him?
Yes.
Okay.
And so next morning, sort of like nothing ever happened, and Stewart and Sanford made their way out to the ranch property out in the desert part of California. So when they first moved out there, then Stewart and his nephew lived in a tent out on the ranch until they completed the construction of the main house. So George, the father, was like a construction worker, so he helped basically tell them how to build it and that kind of thing. But they built it themselves, so that's something anyway. And then once the chicken coops were built and the chickens were trucked in, it basically became Sanford's responsibility to complete most of the daily tasks on the ranch. So he wasn't allowed to leave to go to school. He wasn't allowed to leave to talk to anyone, make any friends. He was pretty much just trapped on that ranch property, working all the time.
And probably being molested in the evenings or whenever.
Yes. We will talk more about that.
Isolated.
Yes, exactly. Now, Stewart would sometimes help with the ranch work, but mostly he liked to socialize out in Wineville and the other surrounding towns. He liked to play his piano in the house, or he would go visit his mom and friends over in LA. When Stewart was at home, he was moody and temperamental. So he could be charming and funny and engaging one minute, but the next minute he could be cruel and explosively angry. He did not like to be questioned, challenged, or told no, and would become irate and lash out aggressively at whoever was around. Often, this abuse was centered on Sanford, who was hit, punched, kicked, and more almost daily. Stewart also denied him food and would lock him in the shed or a chicken coop for days at a time if he did something to anger him. Stewart's violent sexual proclivities were also worse when he was angry, and Sanford reported that in addition to regular rape, Stewart regularly sodomized him using objects, including wooden boards and barbed wire.
Barbed wire?
He had a lot of significant damage to his body.
Assuming you mean anal sodomy?
Yes.
Good God.
Yes. So, Tricia, what diagnoses do you think I should be considering based on what we know so far?
Well, I mean, the one that comes to mind, first of all, is narcissism.
Yes.
Obviously, some sexual, sadistic stuff is happening. The need for control and getting joy or whatever by making someone else hurt. The lack of remorse that seems to be there, leads to ASPD as well, or at least some sort of psychopathy, some of those tendencies. That's where I don't know where the anger totally is coming from because,
Got it. Well, you and I are on exactly the same page. Those are kind of the three that come to my mind as well.
Look at you guys. We can learn as we go.
Yeah. So I think there's definitely that narcissism there. And very, very fragile ego for Stewart, I think. Like, it could be any sort of even perceived disagreement or slight, and he could lash out in anger.
I mean, it's almost like he got this kid from his sister just so he would have someone to have control over and abuse.
I think that you're not wrong about that.
Because it's not, I mean, maybe he wanted free labor, but I don't know.
That's not really what he wanted. Yeah. So I would definitely categorize Stewart also as a malignant narcissist, right? So that kind that not only feels they're better and, wants to be highly revered and everything, but uses their powers for evil. And I think he definitely does.
And you claim he's very charming. So
right. He had that.
We know that can come from, well, all those personality disorders can display that, but
yeah. And I think looking back too at his younger years, right, with like lying and stealing and all of that, I think that makes a good argument for some antisocial or psychopathy going on there too.
How old is he at this time?
He's 21, 22, somewhere
And
in
his
there.
nephew's 13, 14. So he's still a relatively young adult
He is.
for committing this type of violent crimes on his own family.
Yes.
Who did nothing to him.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
So, one time, Sanford started to run away in the middle of the night, and he made it a few miles down the road before he realized that he had nowhere to go and was in the country illegally. So he remembered that fact. And so he turned around and went back. And his punishment from Stewart was a severe beating, followed by being held in a hole dug in the ground with a wooden lid that was weighed down, stuck flat on his back with very little room to move for 2 days.
Who's that remind you of?
Oh, it's a good question. My brain did not think of anyone else.
Billy Milligan.
Yes. Yeah, that's right.
Man, we know too much about it.
We do.
I mean,
yeah.
he got urinated on while he was in that hole in the ground. But
Right.
yeah,
Yep.
being like forced in there like a casket.
Yep. And that wouldn't be the only time that was a punishment. That was something that happened
That's awful.
regularly after that.
Okay.
So, soon, Stewart seemed to get bored with having only one boy. So he started coming back from the town with young migrant boys, often Spanish-speaking only, and under the guise of having paid work for them to do. These boys would range in age from about 10 to 13. And Sanford estimated that dozens of them passed through the ranch during the 2 years that he was there. Instead of putting them to work on the ranch, Stewart would chain the boys up in one of the sheds on the property and then repeatedly torture and rape them over several days. Sanford was often forced to help Stewart in holding these boys captive, being asked to tie them up or nail the door to the shed shut, occasionally bringing them food or water. And they would beg him to let them go, but Sanford would instead tell them, just go along with what he wants, it'll be easier that way. Because he knew that without these boys being there, he would be the target every night. Sometimes these boys were returned to their families, too afraid to report what had happened and worried about being deported. And sometimes these boys, mostly unidentified migrants, were never seen again. Tricia, thoughts?
I mean, I'm just thinking of past cases coming to my head. Obviously, he's picking vulnerable populations. He likes his boys between the ages of 10 and 13. That was about the age of his nephew when he got him. So to me, I'm going back to like whatever happened to him, the trigger part or whatever in his childhood, in Stewart's childhood, was at that age.
Right. He did say he was molested by his father when he was 10.
Okay. So like right there, you're seeing maybe that's why he's choosing the population he is. Plus they're kids and they're migrants, so they're easy to manipulate and control. As far as little Sanford having to help, I'm thinking of Gary Heidnick, and I'm also thinking of Teresa Knorr, with the victims being, I don't want to say brainwashed, but conditioned to just accepting sort of what's going on, and like also trying not to have that happen to them, so they are like happy for a break. Not that they are at all wanting these other kids to have this happen. They're not like, getting off on it sadistically.
Right.
They just need a break, and so that's how they're coping with it, which I'm sure is going to lead to PTSD down the line or survivor's guilt.
100%. Yes.
So
yeah, those are good insights.
thanks.
Now, in February 1928, Stewart arrived back at the ranch late one night, very agitated and giddy. He held a bucket out towards Sanford and ordered him to look inside. In the bucket was the head of a teenage Hispanic boy. Stewart claimed that he'd been trying to bring this boy back to work at the ranch, and he had tried to sexually assault him in the car on the way, But this boy, he fought back and managed to get out of the car, which is when Stewart pulled out a gun and shot him 10 times.
Oh, okay.
Not overkill or anything.
Right.
Right?
A little rage.
Yes. So Stewart drove the boy's body out into the desert and left it there, but said he removed the head to prevent identification.
Mm-hmm.
He then forced Sanford to build a large bonfire and threw the head in the fire. When it was sufficiently burned, he also made Sanford use an axe to break up the remaining skull into tiny pieces that could be mixed into the ashes. Stewart threatened to kill Sanford if he ever told anyone. Then, on March 10th, 1928, 9-year-old Walter Collins went on a car ride with a friend of his mom's and was looking forward to being able to ride horses on a ranch. Unfortunately for Walter, that friend was Stewart Northcott, and his ranch didn't have any horses, just chickens. Once on the ranch, Walter realized quickly that he was not in a good situation and asked to go home repeatedly. In response, Stewart punched him in the head, knocking him out, and then took him into one of several chicken coops where he beat and raped him for hours. He remained on the ranch for several days while Stewart tortured him repeatedly. During this time, Stewart's mom, Louise, decided to come out to the ranch for a visit. Now, one might expect that Stewart might try to hide the fact that he was holding a 9-year-old sex slave hostage in the shed from his mother, but that was not the case. She had known all along that her son was kidnapping and abusing young boys, and the only thing that really upset her about Walter's presence was that he was the son of somebody that Stewart knew, so he could be traced back to the family.
Mm-hmm.
So she chastised him for being stupid enough to take a child that he actually knew who could be traced back to him. And so Stewart and Louise decided that Walter had to die.
Dead men tell no tales.
Right. And that Sanford had to help too, so there would be a good reason for nobody to tell. The whole idea of, mutually assured destruction. Mm-hmm. If you tell, then you get in trouble
You're telling
too.
on yourself.
Mm-hmm. So, Louise was the first to hit Walter in the head with an axe. She and Stewart then forced Sanford to take a swing. And then Stewart followed up with several more axe blows to the head until he was sure that little Walter was dead. He then was buried in a shallow grave under the chicken coop and covered in quicklime to dissolve the body and the bones. Tricia, thoughts on Louise and what just transpired?
What's up with her? I mean, she's okay with this? Was it her? It sounds like it was her idea. And if that's the case, what is going on with her that we don't know about? I mean, yeah, maybe Stewart was molested by his dad / grandpa, but what's up with her? What do you think?
I think that it ties back to the sort of intense codependency that the two of them had. She literally moved her son to another country to help save him from potential consequences. And so I think this was, another extreme case of her just wanting to protect her little baby boy, whether he was actually hers or not. And so it's some sort of perverse way of trying to protect him from his own actions.
Does Sanford... Yeah, but she participated. Does Sanford give any insight on how she reacted during this? Was she upset? Was she cool, calculated cucumber when she was bludgeoning this little boy to death? Or, I mean, it's one thing to help cover up a crime or look the other way, but if she was the first to wield the axe, and it was her idea, it doesn't seem like it's that. It seems like it's more I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but it almost seems like she wanted to do it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, maybe. She was described sort of as very pragmatic about it. This is just a thing that had to be done.
Okay. So lack of emotion either way, maybe.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So that's not necessarily she enjoyed it the way that Stewart did, but that it was...
More like a mafia kill.
Kind of, yeah.
Okay. Just need to be done. Just get it over with.
Exactly.
Move on. All right.
Yep. And then they never talked about it ever again.
All right.
So then, on May 16th, 1928, the Winslow brothers, 12-year-old Lewis and 10-year-old Nelson from Pomona, California, were lured out to the ranch with the promise of paid work. Of course, they realized once they got to the ranch that they were in big trouble. Stewart had Sanford nail the door shut while he was in a coop with both boys, torturing them in front of each other for several hours. Over the next few days, Stewart alternated between the brothers, bringing one into the house to be sexually assaulted, while the other remained locked in the chicken coop. Eventually, he decided that he was done with them, and told Sanford to dig an extra deep grave in the floor of a shed. He also instructed Sanford to use an axe to kill the older brother, while he, Stewart, would kill the younger brother in a different room. But Sanford couldn't bring himself to do it. Stewart would punish Sanford later, back with the shallow grave with the wooden lid over the top punishment. But since Sanford hadn't held up his end of the deal, Stewart took the axe and hit Lewis in the head several times before pushing his body into the pre-dug grave. He then did the same to Nelson, but neither boy had died yet and were heard making quiet moaning noises from inside the hole. Stewart then ordered Sanford to fill in the grave with dirt anyway. So while Lewis and Nelson likely would have died from their head wounds eventually, they ultimately died of suffocation from being buried alive.
That Sanford did.
That Sanford did the burying, yes. So how terrifying do you think it must have been for those boys, including Sanford?
I hope that those boys were knocked so hard that they just didn't know what was going on, and it was more just like bodily responses. Because if they were able to understand what was going on and they were buried alive, like that's got to be like, that's what horror movies are made out of. What was that one horror movie where she was buried alive? I want to say it had Kiefer Sutherland in it. It's really old.
I don't really watch
The
horror
Vanishing.
movies.
I think it's The Vanishing. It's not horror, thriller. I think it was called The Vanishing. Anyways, watching that as a kid, like it's always scared me. Or Kill Bill. You know, when she like crawls out of that, well, she like punches her way out of that grave. Like all that shit's just terrifying. It's not being able to breathe and being in a dark, confined space or breathing in dirt. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, it does sound, at least according to Sanford's memories, that they were not conscious. They weren't awake.
Well, good.
But that he did recall hearing them kind of like gasping and choking on the dirt.
Yeah. Hopefully they were gone. By that point, it was just a response of their body.
Right. So, during the summer of 1928, Sanford's older sister, Jessie, who had been worried about her younger brother for the past 2 years, came for an unannounced visit.
Sorry, did you say younger or older?
Older.
Okay.
Despite threats from Stewart, Sanford confessed to his sister about what had been happening on the ranch. Out of fear for her own and her brother's safety, Jessie waited until she left town before she called the police. Sanford was left alone on the ranch for 2 days before police arrived and found him. Stewart and his parents had fled back to Canada.
They left him there?
They left him there. And now in September of that year, after driving out and finding Sanford there all alone, police found human bone fragments buried on the ranch, and with the help of Sanford's reporting, were able to link them to the Winslow brothers, Lewis and Nelson. They also found personal effects from the boys and an axe with blood on it. But Walter Collins' remains were never found.
Is he the one that was burned?
No.
No, that was the little boy's head. That was someone else.
That was the one that Mom participated in and where it was buried was lime.
Yeah.
In the grave. Yeah.
Okay.
And so Walter Collins' story is actually a little bit interesting. And it was actually the basis for the movie The Changeling with Angelina Jolie and Clint Eastwood in it. Because when Mom reported him missing after he hadn't come home, police at one point accused her of doing something to kill him. And then found just sort of another random boy in like the LA area, and they decided that that was just Walter Collins now, and tried to like bring him home to
Pass him off.
pass him off as Walter. But Mom was like, "That's not my son. That's not my son," and that's a whole dramatic thing. But yeah,
But that's not what happened in real life, right?
that is what happened in real life.
Oh, so Walter's mom, eventually some random kid came and they were like, "This is your son." And she's like, "It's not my son."
Yes.
No.
And then, yeah, a whole bunch of craziness ensued. But
Okay.
when really what happened to her son was that he was a victim of Stewart Northcott.
Okay. Interesting.
So it wasn't long before Stewart was located in Canada and extradited back to California to face charges of murder, sexual abuse, and sodomy. While in prison at San Quentin, Stewart went back and forth between claiming his innocence and giving big dramatic confessions. At various times, he admitted to killing up to 20 young boys and running a pedophile ring where he rented out the boys he kidnapped to other rich men for sex. At one point, Stewart's mother, Louise, claimed that she was responsible for all of the murders and that her son should go free, but she then recanted that statement. In December 1928, though, Louise did plead guilty for her part in the murder of Walter Collins and was sentenced to life in prison.
But if they already thought Walter was still alive, I'm confused.
Yeah. So all of the stuff that happened with like Walter was like very shortly after he disappeared.
Oh.
Yeah, so that was like during a matter of months.
So then eventually, like, they determined that was not Walter?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Gotcha.
Sorry, that was confusing.
No worries.
Yeah. And so she was sentenced to life in prison because she was a woman, so they weren't going to sentence her to death. But she only ended up serving 16 years before being released on parole
Okay.
and then extradited or deported back to Canada.
Okay.
So, thoughts, questions about anything that has been talked about?
I had one and it left. It was, did Sanford say anything about a pedophile sex ring? People coming and going from the ranch? Was that any of that in there?
He didn't say anything about that. I didn't see that. That wasn't in the book.
Okay.
But we do know that like boys were coming and going at all hours, and
it would just seem like he would know if there were also adults coming and going. So maybe
it's
Stewart
also possible,
made up shit, or maybe at a different time.
Right. It's also possible that the other adults came when Stewart was locked in one of the chicken coops, or Sanford. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
I just was curious if he witnessed any of that,
right?
Or if that was like Stewart boasting in jail.
Right.
Weird, the way narcissists do.
Definitely. And naming names of powerful people.
Right. Little John Wayne Gacy action.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So Sanford, being only 15 when he was discovered out at the ranch, stayed at the hospital for several months recovering from his physical and emotional injuries. He had very intense PTSD, was very dissociative, and
Sure. I don't blame him.
never truly fully recovered, which I think is understandable. And because he did participate in the murders of the Winslow brothers, he was charged as a juvenile as an accessory to murder. So Sanford and Stewart weren't actually charged in the murders of Walter, because Mom already confessed to it.
Okay.
So,
and she hit the first blow, so possibly she did kill him.
Yes. So the prosecutor took a special interest in Sanford, though, and could see how truly traumatized he was. So he arranged for Sanford to serve his time at a youth rehabilitation center where he lived in kind of more of like a family milieu setting and received job training and mental health treatment. And so Sanford was released at the age of 18, and he moved back to Canada and ended up, after that, having a long and mostly happy life. He was a soldier in World War II. He fought for the Allied forces and, got married, had kids and grandkids, and kind of led a quiet life after that.
Good.
Yeah.
So when he got out of the the hospital in the States. Do you know who he went back to in Canada? I'm hoping he didn't go back to his family.
He lived with his sister to start with.
His sister, okay.
Until he was able to kind of get on his feet.
Okay. She's okay.
Yes, we liked her. she was the only one who came looking for him.
Right, and then reported something.
Yeah.
Thank goodness that her uncle didn't, like, kill her, too.
Right.
I mean, she obviously wasn't his type, but, you know, he might have killed her to stop her from saying anything. Obviously, he was scared she would because they moved. Or they, like, got the hell out of Dodge before
exactly.
the cops came, so knew she was serious business.
Yes, definitely. So, you know, it's nice to see a victim actually be treated like a victim and get help, especially, you know, this was the early 1900s. This was 1929.
Yeah.
You know, there's not a whole lot of understanding around mental health back then.
So so Stewart, life in prison, did he get the chair or whatever it was back then?
I'm about to get into that.
Oh, okay, sorry. Jumping the gun.
Yes. So Stewart's trial started in January 1929 and lasted for 27 days. He was charged with 3 counts of murder, one for the unnamed Hispanic male whose head he brought back.
Good, there was at least something.
Because there was a body.
Okay.
Right. And one each for the Winslow brothers. Now, Stewart decided to represent himself at trial because he's a malignant narcissist and thought he knew better than everyone.
What is that joke where they say, it's like something about when you defend yourself. I can't remember what it is. Never mind.
Oh, yeah, I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm going to Google it.
Okay.
Keep going.
So, the prosecution's main witness was Sanford Clark, who testified to all the abuse and torture that he experienced in the 2 years he spent on his uncle's farm, as well as the violence that he witnessed and was forced to participate in. Stewart did not do himself any favors in the way that he treated Sanford in court. He openly mocked and insulted him for not trying to escape or for not fighting back. And then on February 8th, 1929, Stewart Northcott was found guilty of 3 counts of murder, and 5 days later, the judge sentenced him to death.
Okay.
Once all his appeals were up, Gordon Stewart Northcott was hanged on October 2nd, 1930. There was, however, a mistake during his execution, and instead of the rope breaking his neck, Stewart was slowly strangled by the rope for 12 minutes before he was declared dead. Tricia?
I found the joke. A man who represents himself has a fool for a lawyer.
Ah.
That's what I was thinking of.
Yep, pretty much.
Yeah. This always comes to mind when they say hanged. Like, why isn't it hung? But that's not what you're asking me. But that always is something I'm like, why didn't they say they were hung to death, but they were hanged? The 12 minutes. Well, another thing that came to me is, like, it does take a long time to suffocate to death or to be strangled to death, even by rope.
Yep.
So I don't want to be like, hey, he deserved it, because that's not my place. But I'm sure no one was crying tears for him.
Oh, yeah. They could have stepped in and
redone the things.
Yeah, and nobody did.
Broke his neck the way it's supposed to happen. And they just let him hang there.
Yep.
Till he died. Yeah. How long did he wait till that happened? I missed that part. Does it say? Like, how long was he on death row or whatever?
He was on death row for about 1.5 years.
Oh, a lot quicker than it is now.
Yeah.
Probably a way different, like, appeal process back then.
Right. I think it's pretty much just like you get one appeal.
Yeah.
And since he was his own lawyer.
Uh-huh.
It didn't go well,
He didn't even go to law school. I mean, at least Bundy went to law school for a little while.
Right. Exactly. He just thought that he knew better.
Right.
And, you know, he was one of the youngest documented serial killers and one of the youngest to be put to death for his crimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well,
right.
how do you feel about him being put to death?
I mean, generally speaking, I'm not usually a big fan of the death penalty.
It's too expensive.
Right. And everything.
The morality of it all that
yeah,
stuff. But mostly like the expense.
Yeah. I mean, for me, some of it is that morality. Like, how can we say it's wrong to kill and then kill ourselves? But this guy was a monster. And I can't say that I'm sad that he died quickly.
Yeah. slowly but quickly.
Yes. Yeah, he was only, like 24, 25 when he
Yeah,
died?
that's probably one of the still like youngest people to be executed in the U.S.
Right, yeah. Because remember, all of this stuff happened before he was 23 years old.
Yeah. Well, that's like a very sad story
It is a very sad story.
all around. We don't really get to know Stewart very well because it's so old. So there's
Right.
like, and it's coming from Sanford's point of view, it sounds like.
Right.
So we don't really get to, we can speculate a little bit on the trauma he suffered as a child. And then going from what we know so far, there's probably a lot more trauma that we don't know about.
Probably.
Again, he still had free will. He wasn't
Right.
psychotic or delusional or any of that stuff. So
Right.
he made the choice to be a murderer of children and a pedophile.
He was definitely a pedophile. Yeah.
Yeah, 10 to 13. Yeah.
Yep. Prepubescent boys. So. And then throw in just like his family and how they all covered for him. If I'm remembering right, his dad, after, him and, his wife got arrested, dad ended up in like having a mental breakdown and being in like a mental hospital.
Oh.
Where he eventually died by suicide.
So he might have had some like emotions and feelings and guilt and stuff about what was happening.
Yes. Yeah. There was, during the part of the story in the book where Jessie was there, Sanford's sister, visiting, there was a part of that where they were all staying at the grandparents' house, and Jessie convinced basically the grandfather to help her and Sanford escape. And he tried to help, but then they got caught and it didn't work out. But she eventually did escape.
So he was controlled by the wife, for
yes,
sure.
He was.
He's a grown man. He could have yanked that grandkid out of there if he really wanted to.
Yes.
He wasn't afraid of something else.
I think he was afraid of Sanford. Or not Sanford. He was afraid of Stewart. And he was afraid of his wife.
Yeah. Well, good story.
I know it doesn't end on any sort of upper or anything.
I mean, at least he was punished, and he's not hurting. He wasn't hurting kids anymore after that.
Right.
I hope that the families of all those missing boys, like that, there was a newspaper article or something where they could, like, at least maybe get a little closure and be like, that's probably what happened to them. That's terrible, but at least, I don't know. It's hard to say.
It is hard to say, especially like records back then.
Right.
And like if they were undocumented coming from Mexico to be laborers and so potentially up to 20 victims.
Yeah.
And he got charged and found guilty for 3.
Well, thanks for sharing your story.
Yeah.
That was a good one. That was long.
Yeah?
Yeah. I mean, normally we could have broken this one up.
You think so?
Yeah.
No. Okay.
But no, it's okay. We'll just do a long one, you guys.
Cool.
One and done, but it's sort of long. So our next case, was that it for?
That was it. Yeah.
Our next case, which I'm hoping will be ready by next week, I'm hoping so, is going to be, I'll give the diagnosis. BPD, borderline personality disorder. We haven't done very many of serial killers with those, so.
We have not.
A little Charles Cullen.
Yep.
And
maybe that's all?
I mean, I know Jeffrey Dahmer has it, but we haven't done him yet. We're going to get to Jeffrey Dahmer. He's just so big.
It's Tricia's favorite, and so she wants to like...
I say it's like my favorite, but yes, I did do my forensic anthropology project on him a few years ago, and I find his story to be fascinating and sad and awful and disgusting, all of the things. So yeah, We haven't done them yet, but we'll get to it.
Eventually.
But yes, we are going to do someone else with borderline personality disorder next time.
Sounds like it'll be fun.
Yeah. Did you create something for the end of this?
I did.
Okay, what is it?
So, Tricia, what do we do if a sly young man offers us a job on his chicken ranch?
Say, heck no, I don't want to work with your chickens. And then go home. And then, go nuts, go home, then go to therapy.
Yes,
I
good
screwed
job.
that up. This is not normal.
That's true.
It's normally reversed, damn it. Okay. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening. Stay safe. We'll see you next Tuesday.
Bye.
Bye.